I'm inspired by storytelling, right? So,
Yeah.
the book is almost like a hero's journey. The subtitle is a journey from hopelessness street to possibility road,
Hmm.
and that's actually what the book it is. It book is. It is a guide in a way, and there are three parts of the book, and the first part is about me, my life,
Yeah.
my life with RP, and I tell stories and anecdotes. Um, and the point of sharing my story is to show people that you can actually, think and be convinced that you are a person who can this and this and this and can't do this and this and this.
Yeah.
And then you live your life believing in all the things that you kind of been raised to believe by
Yeah.
your culture and your society and
Hmm.
your parents and so in a sense it's not directed as such to people with blindness or disabilities. It's actually sort of it's a book that shows you the steps from being a person who feels limited all the time to becoming a person who can see possibilities, in the limitations. So how can I turn this limitation into a possibility, into something that makes me grow as a person and makes me stronger because I endured or experienced limitations. And the first part is about that, and then the second part is, okay, when you at one point in your life realize that I can't stand this version of myself any longer, what can
Mm.
you do to make the transformation? I had this experience in 16. I suffered from stress and depression. I simply collapsed one day at work. I was handling 22 animated movies at the same time, like small
Wow.
two minute versions of,
Yeah.
and no, they were in all different stages. So they were at the script, and some had gone into animation, and some were in an animatic state, and they were sort of all over the place. And one day, I was also a senior art director, so I had like four art directors who came to me for advice, and they came for direction and all that. And I did that with that limited vision. So my system just said, no more, you are insane if you keep on doing this. So the body simply shut down. Like I couldn't, my hands were shaking, and I couldn't, it refused to do
Wow.
anything. Yeah.
So when you
And I
say
didn't
it shut
even,
down, what do you mean? What
well,
you just like couldn't function? Is that
it couldn't
and
function. I
you
couldn't
were in your
think.
office?
I was actually home. It was the morning.
Okay.
I was sitting on the edge. I was sitting on the bedside, and I was just like, and I looked at my hands. They were just doing this. They were just shaking, and
Yeah.
I couldn't breathe, and I couldn't think. I couldn't. I was just, I was
Hmm.
just I crashed simply, and
Yeah.
um, and I didn't know at that time that I was legally blind. I hadn't been at the ophthalmologist for 7 years, so
Yeah.
I called in sick, and I was on sick leave for almost, yeah, for several months, and we didn't even know why. And I was going to to therapists and psychologists, and we were trying to figure out what was wrong. And I didn't mention. I mentioned one time that I had a little bit of, I had something with my eyes, but they were kind of, yeah, one thing at a time, right? Now you're bringing up too many problems. Okay, come
Yeah.
again. How about your childhood and all that stuff? And one day, my wife, she said, Morten, how about your vision? How when were you tested the last time? And I said, it's 7 years since. And then I went to the ophthalmologist, and he looked at me and said, "Oh, do you know that you are legally blind?" And I said, "No, I don't." And he said, "Whoa, you have only like 4 degrees of vision left, and that's bad. What do you do?"
Yeah.
I said, "Yeah, I'm an art director working with visual communication." He's like, "What?" and then uh, and then the fun thing, when I was leaving the office, and I turned around and said, "Oh, I should probably stop driving then, right?" And he's like, "What? Are you driving?" So I was
Oh.
just living a life like nothing
Mm-hmm.
was wrong with me, and that's when it all started. And I had this for half a year. I was just becoming more and more sad and depressed, and had no energy, and people around me were kind and helping me, and everyone was convinced that I was, the best thing for me was to retire in a way.
Yeah.
And I was sitting there at the job center, the local job center, and I had all these people around me, and I just felt so, you know, uh, so hopeless. And I remember they were talking about clauses and procedures, and how they could prepare me for retirement, and then I had this moment where I felt that this is it. Now I could, if I disappeared from the surface of this earth, it wouldn't matter. I could just,
Ooh.
it didn't really matter at all because I had no future. I was, I couldn't,
Mm.
I couldn't keep up being the person that I wanted to be. So I
Mm.
felt that in a way I died there. But when I felt that sort of very dramatic loss of identity in like a second, I also had this extremely feeling of liberation, like freedom from all the identities. So I had this moment where I just felt so free, and then I heard a voice in my head, and I talk about voices, and it's not like a schizophrenic voice; it was more like a
Yeah.
thought, and that voice said to me, "Morten, what do you want out of life?" And that was just so powerful. I remember getting up from the chair, and I said, "Sorry, guys, I had to stop the meeting. I had to go back and figure out what it is that I want to do with my life." And that started the whole process. And so the second part is about, I started digging into, philosophy, ancient philosophy, Eastern philosophy, religion, why are we the people we are? Why do we think the way that we think? And I
Yeah.
wanted to see, because I had this habit every time I went into a situation where I felt challenged, like someone is asking me to do something. I had this spontaneous feeling of, apprehension and, almost fear from what if I couldn't do it? What if they would figure out that I was blind? What if they,
Yeah.
all those, they were just like,
Yeah.
and I
Uh-huh.
said to myself, can I reprogram that system in a way? So the second part is about how can you actually reprogram the subconscious or the unconscious mind from being always on alert to be like, oh, interesting. I'm going to look into that. So that's the second part. And the third part, knowing is not enough. You have to apply, you have to, put it into experience. So the third part is about, I gave myself 4 challenges through 4 months that would change some of the things that I was struggling with. And the first thing was about negativity. I was always having this inner dialogue, this negative voice who was like, you idiot, you blind fool. Like it said all these things. And I said, okay, let's see if I can change that one. And I did that for 30 days. I gave myself the task. I call it my stop, swap, thought game. And it's about being mindful in your everyday life. So every time I noticed that the inner voice would say, shitty eyes or something, whoa, I had to say stop, swap thought. And then I will have 5 seconds to change that. Then that thought into, I have to figure out how to come up with a positive, you know, um,
Yeah.
the opposite. And I had to do that for a month, and I literally changed that inner dialogue that I had. I also started experimenting with mindfulness, meditation, and visualizations, and self hypnosis, and I mentioned that about that in the book. I had to challenge the feeling of always, worrying about things. Why always being worried about things? So
Yeah.
so that was the next challenge, and the third challenge was about challenging fear, and the fourth challenge was speaking about this, writing the book, becoming a motivational speaker, and just talk about it and share it so I could put my story and my experiences into use. So
Yeah.
if so that's the book, and I narrated it also as an audiobook, so it also exists as an audiobook.
No, I'm 110% gonna buy and read your book because I one, you said a lot in there that I connected to, and I appreciate you being open, and I know you're open in your book, and you're open on a lot of podcasts and you speak, but just for me and you having a conversation, being open to me about feeling like you had this death. And when I was younger, I that was my biggest struggle. I think whenever I would think when I was younger, if I ever were to become blind, that I'd want to just die, and that's a hard pill to swallow because RP, you can't really predict its projection. Part of me had this hope of my vision will just stay stable and I'll be one of those people. But then there's also, people who, their vision just, digresses really fast in a short period of time. So, there's kind of this spontaneity that you can be afraid of it. And I'm starting to wrap my head around that. And I'm still definitely scared of that fast progression of loss, but I don't feel as scared. And I also don't feel like if that were to happen that I'd want to die now. But when I was younger, like I felt that way. And that was a heavy thing to feel because I felt that way. That's such a strong feeling, but I didn't say it to anyone, And that's the first time I've said that on this podcast. But yeah, I had feelings when I was younger where I was just kind of just like what you described. What's the point of living if, in my mind, I thought that I was just going to be like, having to have like just be stuck in a house and, not have a purpose and not have a fulfilled career, not have a fulfilling family life. I'm married now, but I was also worried about like, will someone want to date me? Will someone want to marry me? There's all these thoughts and that kind of goes into what you're talking about, all these worries you have. And you know what? It's all in your head too. It's like that's your inner voice that you're talking about telling you this. And I'm fascinated by that because you reprogrammed. You're saying you had to actively reprogram that voice in your voice that's kind of harsh on you. And that is hard to do. And that is a struggle that I still am struggling with. So yeah, I'm definitely fascinated by that.